The distress beacon had gone silent 3 hours ago. Commander Lisa Chen stood at the viewport of the meridian, watching the ice moon of Kepler 442f grow larger against the black. Her reflection stared back, sharp cheekbones, dark eyes rimmed with sleeplessness, the silver insignia of the United Colonies barely visible on her collar. Behind her, the bridge hummed with controlled tension. ETA 6 minutes, announced Lieutenant Parker from navigation. Lisa didn't respond. Her mind was calculating probabilities, running through scenarios. Research Station Theta 7 had been dark for exactly 17 hours and 42 minutes. The last transmission had been garbled, cut short by what sounded like weapons fire. Then nothing. The Kashari Dominion had been pushing into this sector for months. Their bioengineered shock troops were infamous, 7 feet of reinforced bone structure and neural acceleration that made them nearly impossible to kill in close combat. If they'd hit Theta 7, the 23 scientists stationed there wouldn't have stood a chance. "Ma'am," said Alex Reeves, her tactical officer. He was young, barely 26, but his neural implant gave him processing speed that rivaled the ship's AI. "Thermal scans are unusual." Lisa turned. "Unusual how?" Alex's eyes flickered, the telltale sign of his implant accessing data streams. "I'm reading deceased heat signatures, approximately 30 bodies in the main compound, but the thermal decay patterns don't match. Some bodies are showing ambient temperature, others are still registering residual heat. The timeline doesn't make sense." "Could be environmental controls malfunctioning," Lisa suggested, though her instincts whispered otherwise. "No, ma'am. Life support is fully operational, atmospheric processors running normally. It's just the bodies cooled at different rates, as if they died hours apart, but our timeline suggests a single assault." The meridian shuddered slightly as it entered the moon's thin atmosphere. Through the viewport, Lisa could see the research station, a cluster of pressurized domes connected by transit tubes, half buried in the methane ice. Lights were on. Everything looked normal except for the gaping hole in Dome 3's western wall. "Landing in 2 minutes, Parker announced. Lisa pulled on her combat helmet, felt the neural interface sync with her occipital implant. The heads-up display bloomed across her vision, atmospheric readings, squad positions, weapon status. "Full combat deployment. Standard breach protocol. I want bioscans every 30 seconds. Alex was already armored, checking his plasma rifle with practiced efficiency. "Should we assume hostile presence?" "Assume everything," Lisa said. The airlock hissed open, and Lisa stepped onto the surface of Kepler 442f. The gravity was light, only 60% of Earth's, making each step feel slightly surreal. The station loomed ahead, its lights casting long shadows across the ice. Her squad fanned out, 12 Marines, each one a veteran of the Kashari conflicts. They moved in practiced formation toward the breach in Dome 3. "Bioscans are clear," Alex reported from her right. "No life signs except us." They reached the breach. The metal had been torn inward with tremendous force, the edges still showing the molecular disruption pattern of Kashari plasma cutters. Lisa stepped through. The sight inside stopped her cold. Bodies, Kashari warriors in their distinctive black armor, sprawled across the floor in pools of frozen blood. But they weren't just dead, they were destroyed. Limbs torn off, armor cracked open like eggshells. One warrior's helmet had been crushed with such force that the reinforced alloy had folded inward. "Jesus," someone whispered over the comm. Lisa knelt beside the nearest body. The Kashari had been dead for hours. The blood was crystallized, the body frozen solid, but the violence of the death was stunning. These warriors were engineered to be nearly indestructible, yet something had torn through them like tissue paper. "How many?" she asked. Alex's eyes flickered. 31 Kashari, 0 human casualties visible in this dome. "That's impossible," said Corporal Martinez. 23 scientists against 31 Kashari shock troops. They should have been massacred. Lisa stood, her mind racing. Alex, those thermal readings you mentioned, where are the bodies that are still warm? Dome 1, the main laboratory. They moved through the transit tubes, past walls still decorated with photos of smiling researchers, past whiteboards covered in quantum equations. The normalcy of it made Lisa's skin crawl. This should have been a slaughterhouse. Instead, it looked like everyone had just stepped out for lunch. Until they reached Dome 1. The laboratory was a cathedral of science, 3 stories tall, filled with gleaming equipment and holographic displays still running simulations. And scattered throughout like broken dolls were the researchers. All 23 of them dead. But unlike the Kashari, these bodies were pristine. No wounds, no trauma. They simply lay where they'd fallen as if sleep had taken them mid-step. Bioscan, Lisa ordered, her voice tight. Alex moved to the nearest body, a woman in her 50s, her face peaceful. He pulled out his medical scanner, ran it over her torso. His face went pale. "Ma'am, I'm reading massive neural trauma. Her entire cerebral cortex it's burned out. Specifically the frontal lobe and the limbic system, like something overloaded her brain." "Check the others." They did. Every researcher showed the same pattern. Neural tissue destroyed, but the rest of the body untouched. And the thermal readings Alex had mentioned suddenly made terrible sense. These people had died at different times over the course of several hours, even though the Kashari assault had taken perhaps 15 minutes. Lisa looked around the laboratory, searching for answers. That's when she saw it. At the center of the room stood a containment field, a shimmering sphere of energy about 3 meters in diameter. Inside it, suspended in electromagnetic suspension, was something that shouldn't exist. A crystalline structure, impossibly complex, pulsing with faint bioluminescence. It was beautiful and utterly alien, its geometry hurting to look at, angles that seemed to exist in more dimensions than Lisa's brain could process. "What the hell is that?" Martinez breathed. Alex was already accessing the station's logs, his eyes flickering rapidly. According to the research notes, they found it, 4 weeks ago, buried in the ice. Dr. Sarah Chen, he glanced at Lisa, recognizing the surname, "Your sister, ma'am. She led the excavation. They thought it was a precursor artifact." The precursors, the ancient civilization that had left ruins scattered across a dozen systems, then vanished 1,000,000 years ago. Finding a functioning precursor device was every xenoarchaeologist's dream. It was also, Lisa now realized, potentially a nightmare. "Keep reading," she said quietly. "They activated it 3 days ago. Initial tests showed it was some kind of consciousness amplifier. It could enhance neural activity, boost cognitive function by orders of magnitude." Alex's voice dropped. Dr. Chen noted that test subjects, volunteers, reported increased intelligence, expanded awareness, but there were side effects: headaches, insomnia, vivid dreams. "When did the Kashari attack?" 17 hours ago, according to the breach timestamp. Lisa approached the containment field slowly, studying the artifact. It pulsed in rhythm, almost like a heartbeat, and now that she was closer she could feel something, a presence, not hostile exactly but vast, ancient, aware. "Alex, pull up the security footage. I want to see what happened." The holographic display flickered to life, showing the laboratory from multiple angles. Lisa watched as Kashari warriors burst through the doors, weapons raised. The scientists scattered, screaming. It should have been a massacre. But then something changed. The researchers stopped running. One by one they turned to face their attackers. Their expressions were blank, their movements synchronized. And the Kashari began to scream. The warriors dropped their weapons, clutching their heads. Some tried to run. Others fired wildly, but one by one they fell. and as each Kashari died, one of the researchers collapsed as well. Lisa watched her sister, Dr. Sarah Chen, standing calmly as a Kashari warrior charged her. The warrior raised his blade. Sarah didn't move, and then the warrior simply stopped. His body went rigid. Blood began streaming from his eyes, his ears. He fell. Sarah fell a moment later. "My God," Alex whispered. "They weaponized it. They used the artifact to defend themselves." "Not weaponized," Lisa corrected, understanding dawning cold and terrible. "It connected them, all of them. When the Kashari attacked, the researchers' minds were linked through the artifact. They shared consciousness. 23 human minds acting as one, amplified by precursor technology. They killed the Kashari with their thoughts. More than that." Lisa pointed at the footage at the precise timing. "Look at how they died. The Kashari's neural systems were overloaded, the same trauma the researchers show. They attacked the Kashari minds directly, but—" She paused, the horrible logic clicking into place. "The artifact doesn't distinguish between aggressor and user. It amplified the neural feedback. Every Kashari they killed created a backlash, a psychic recoil. It burned out their own brains in the process." The laboratory was silent, except for the hum of equipment and that rhythmic pulse from the artifact. "They won," Martinez said softly. "They saved themselves, but the cost was everything," Lisa finished. She stared at the crystalline structure, at this remnant of a civilization long dead. Had the precursors built it as a weapon, a tool, a test? And had they destroyed themselves the same way, their consciousness expanded until it consumed them? Alex touched her arm gently. "Ma'am, what do we do with it?" Lisa was quiet for a long moment. Her sister was dead. All of them were dead. But they defended themselves against impossible odds, had turned their own minds into weapons to survive. It hadn't been enough. "We lock it down," she said finally. "Triple containment. No one touches it. No one studies it. We'll mark this station as hazardous and off-limits." "Command won't like that," Alex said. "Command didn't watch 23 people burn out their own brains to kill their attackers." Lisa turned away from the artifact, from her sister's body. "Some discoveries aren't meant to be made. Some weapons are too dangerous to wield, even against our enemies." As they left Dome 1, Lisa looked back one last time. The artifact pulsed in its containment field, beautiful and terrible and utterly alien, waiting, perhaps for the next species to make the same mistake. The Meridian lifted off an hour later, leaving Research Station Theta 7 silent and dark, except for the warning beacons Lisa had deployed. When reinforcements had arrived, every enemy was dead. But Lisa understood now what was wrong. The defenders had won a battle but lost something far more precious: their humanity, their individuality, consumed in the terrible mathematics of survival. Some victories, she thought as the ice moon receded behind them, were indistinguishable from defeat.